Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Holly Hartman, and I am a certified life transformation and dating and relationship coach. And I am here with my special guest, Dorislee Gilbert. And I can't wait to introduce you and let you know a little bit about what we're talking about today. But first, I just want to acknowledge that October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And so that's part of the reason why I brought Dorislee on, because she has a lot of experience with navigating this, but on the law side of it. And oftentimes we don't have strong advocates in a way that we can have those conversations. And so today, if you're watching, I encourage you to come on and ask questions. And if we can't answer it live, maybe we can follow up later on because we'll have a certain flow. There's certain things that I want to talk about today. But before I get into that, I would really love to introduce Dorislee Gilbert. She is a local lawyer here in town, but also a candidate for the circuit court judge. And we need what you have in our area. So we're in Louisville, Kentucky area, District 10, I think is where it is. But I'm going to let you dig in a little bit more and introduce yourself. So Dorislee, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Holly. My name is Dorislee Gilbert. As she said, I have been an attorney for 20 years. Most of the time I've practiced here in Louisville. I was a felony prosecutor for 15 years. I did a lot of domestic violence and child abuse work then. I was the deputy chief of the domestic violence unit for a period of time. When I left the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, which is what we call the local prosecutor's office here, I joined a nonprofit called the Mary Byron Project. And for 2 years, I was the executive director there. And our mission was enhancing justice to end intimate partner violence. So what I did while I was there is created a legal program to provide free services to survivors of domestic violence or intimate partner violence generally. Primarily in appeals. So when they went to a court and the court said, yes or no, I'm granting you relief or not granting you relief or doing these things, and they believe the court got that wrong, we could ask another court to review that. We also, at the same time, created a program to train other lawyers to take domestic violence cases, and also did a lot of training for lawyers, what I call justice system participants. So that was police, judges, social workers, victim advocates, all kinds of people who were involved in any way in the justice system. We were training them about domestic violence, about the law, about how those things intersect.
Oh, I love that. So can you tell me a little bit more about the Mary Byron Project? I know you're the executive director on it. We briefly met at a lunch and I was like, oh my gosh, I have to have you on. I want to hear this, that people need to hear what this is, because I know for me, I'm a survivor, and the court system and just navigating, working with my lawyer and all of that, it can be re-traumatizing. And that is really an epidemic that's going across. So can you tell me about maybe why this started or some of your experiences that led to being a part of this project?
I can. And first, I should start by saying that I am no longer there. I'm not the executive director there anymore because I did leave last August to run for circuit court judge. And real quick, before I go back to the Mary Byron Project, we were talking about I'm running in Division 10, but it's a Jefferson County-wide race. So anyone in Jefferson County can vote for me. Awesome. But back to the Mary Byron Project. So it was about, I think it was 1994, so my math is really bad, so about 30 years ago or so. Mary Byron was a young woman. It was her 21st birthday, and she was leaving work at a hair salon where she worked here in a local mall. Before that, a few weeks before that, she had reported her ex-boyfriend because he had sexually assaulted her and physically assaulted her. She had reported that to police. She did all the things that we tell people to do. You know, she did the right things. She reported, she stayed consistent in her report. He was arrested, those sorts of, all the stuff that we say, do this. He was arrested, and unbeknownst to her, someone posted his bail, and he tracked her to work. And that night on her 21st birthday, he shot and killed her in the parking lot outside of the mall there. It was obviously a devastating time for her family, but it was really devastating for our community here in Louisville too, because this young woman and her family had sought information. They had asked to be notified if he was released because her family knew she was in danger from him, that he was a scary dude and he was going to hurt her. but they weren't notified. And so her parents are Pat and John Byron. John passed away a few years ago, but Pat is still with us. And she and her husband are amazing people. And a few years after their daughter's death, they joined with some local community leaders and said, our daughter can't have died in vain. And out of that evolved two things. One of them was a program called VINE, which is used nationwide. It stands for Victim Information and Notification Every Day. And it's used almost everywhere in this country. And what it does is people can register with that to be notified if an offender is going to be released from jail, or from prison, if they're being moved in facilities, those sorts of things. Protective action as they need it, right? And then also what came out of that is a few years after that, the Mary Byron Project was born, which is what I ultimately ended up leading. And over the years, they've had a national presence and done helped grow some programs locally to help our domestic violence response in our community, but also to recognize and award programs across the country that have done meaningful work.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, there's so many of us that don't want to use our story in vain. Like the pain that we've gone through. That's why I do what I do, is because I've been through it and I want somebody to change. So I'm glad that they were able to at least utilize this to be able to navigate to help others in the future. And you said VINE, VINE. Wow, I never knew about that resource. That's amazing. And then, so you said that the Mary Byron Project has some national experience, and then is it international as well? I know I have some viewers from the UK that work with these type of
I don't think they've done much international work. I mean, there's probably some connections here and there, but there's never been like an international focus with programming. I know that I was very interested. It is always interesting to watch sort of what goes on around the world as far as how other countries are legislating related to domestic violence. And so I was always very curious about that, and at times thought, oh, we're going to have to look at the way they're doing things in, some other countries, for example, have, oh my gosh, I just blanked on the word that I'm thinking, coercive control, have sort of made that illegal, or grounds for protective orders, those sorts of things. And I often thought we need to look more at some of that, see how that's working out for them, figure out, is there something that we can copy here in the States, or in our particular state at least.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We can learn from others, and then they can learn from us. And then how do we navigate to make the world better? Because you talked about coercive control. That is, there's a lot of that, and that happens so much in the court system, in re-victimization and re-traumatizing and all that experience due to covert narcissism and all of that. Sometimes it's not as obvious necessarily unless you're trained. So tell us a little bit more about the training. I know you mentioned something about having an event where you had people come and did some training. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And actually, since we last talked just this past Monday, I co-led this training with so a woman named Emily Bonestall Postel, who's at the Marcy's Law, Kentucky, and I designed a training tool, and we recently published a law review article in the U of L Law Review about it. But we have done it. We did it at a national conference last year, and then most recently we just did it this past Monday in Lexington for a legal aid conference. And here's the idea. We know that the legal system, whether you're talking about criminal justice or civil cases or family court, that the justice system is really, it's an adversarial system. So it's not ideal for people who have experienced trauma, especially domestic violence, where control is such a part of what makes domestic violence successful for the offender. So the purpose of our training is to help people who are involved in the system be more trauma informed. And one of the ways that we have decided to do that is we've created this really interactive training. And I will tell you, if anyone listening is interested in looking more at this, it is available in print form on the University of Louisville Law Review website, their spring issue. There's an article called Truth Without Trauma, and that's the the main title, and then there's a subtitle, which I cannot remember right now off the top of my head. And it will outline, you can read this entire training exercise, but it involves handing out stars of 5 different colors, and you pass them out to the audience. And as we read through processes that happen during, it's based on criminal justice, so it's a criminal case or criminal cases that we're talking about, but it applies across the board to other types of cases. The idea is to give participants an experience that they can draw on to know what it feels like to be a traumatized person who has gone through the justice system. And through the process, we read different things that happen to different colored stars, and you bend back a point on your star, or you tear one off, you crumple your star at one point, and we see how these interactions with the system affect people who've been traumatized. And some people will come out whole still, because they're still going to be wrinkled, because everybody starts out wrinkled because they were traumatized. So every star starts out wrinkled. But there's hope for them that this process will have not set them back too much. Some people will have bent corners on their star, and with the right, follow up with things going good for them after that, those will come back, right? That experience will not have permanently negatively affected them. And some of the stars are just the center of the star when you're done. And the idea is that how we treat people in the justice system makes a difference for them long lasting. And after the exercise, everybody sort of, feels that. And we have moments where we talk through it with people. We ask them how they feel. We talk about the specific examples, which kind of point out that it's not always about the ultimate result. Because let's be honest, the law can't always be on your side. But even when it's not, if you're treated with dignity and respect and empathy through the process, if things are explained to you clearly, if you're given some semblance of identity and control in the circumstance, even though it's limited what control anybody can have in those circumstances, all of those things help make that experience better for people who have suffered trauma.
Absolutely. Well, I love that y'all are doing this training, and I love that that visual representation of the star, so people can feel that. Because oftentimes, if they've not experienced it themselves, it is so far off of their reality that they can't get in touch. And like you said, most victims just want to be seen and heard and have empathy towards, because that's probably what they haven't experienced anyway. And that goes a long way. I know from my personal experience working with different lawyers and having to fire them as I was going through my divorce, and then hiring somebody and actually having to hire a coach that is a lawyer to teach me how to navigate it so I'm not re-victimized. And my case was nowhere near what so many other people experience. And I can't imagine the fear, and then not having the additional resources. And I know, I don't know if this is something you can speak on, but this is something that I see a lot happening, is the financial impact of people with domestic violence. Most of them have been financially abused. Now they have to hire a lawyer, and they're getting re-victimized by the system, in the sense of they can't afford to keep going back because of this dynamic. Have you seen that play out in your practice? Or
Absolutely. I think that that was one of the benefits of being at the Mary Byron Project, because we were doing work for people without asking many financial questions, because our goal concerned what they had suffered, not what they were capable of, and that whether you have money or don't have money, you don't deserve to be treated like that, and there should be help for you. But so often, you're right, part of the abuse and manipulation is controlling the purse strings. I know that here locally, our legal aid society is really good at this, and I hope this is consistent throughout the state and the country, but they're really good at, they have certain guidelines and who they can provide services for because of the grant funding that they get and the federal government funding and those sorts of things. So it's mostly people who are a certain percentage over the poverty line and below. But for domestic violence cases, they often recognize that is not a valid tool to assess it if you're talking about full household income, because often survivors of domestic violence don't have access to those resources. And I think that that is another reason that lawyers need to be educated and understand this, because often lawyers will think, well, I shouldn't be doing this work free for these people because they do have money. Well, they don't actually a lot of times. Just because the other person in that relationship has the money doesn't mean that they do.
No, absolutely. No, I love that. Now you said Legal Aid Society. Is that what you said? That's local. Is that something that somebody would search to find? And pretty.
So there in Kentucky, there are, I don't know how many, 5 or 6 different organizations like this around the state. They're all legal aid societies, and most states have them. I think they're called usually Legal Aid Society, Legal Aid, that sort of thing. So the legal aid is, we're very familiar with public defenders, who are the people who represent people charged with crimes free of charge. And legal aid is a similar concept in civil cases. So they help with domestic violence cases as far as divorces, child custody, getting protective orders, those sorts of things. But they also do a lot of other work, evictions. They help people get expungements of criminal charges. They help people with landlord-tenant disputes, some employment issues, some welfare type stuff. There's all kinds of different sorts of civil actions that they can be involved in. And most states have, probably all states, but I'm not absolutely confident to say that, but I would say most states have an organization like that, which is funded through grants and federal government money and state government money. And they also typically have a source of volunteers who come through that. If you call them and they don't have enough staff because there's always too much work, they usually have a list of volunteers who they've helped train who can help with some of that work.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, I know some people, we can experience contempt prior to investigation. And many people stay in marriages that are toxic or relationships that are toxic because they truly don't see an out. They don't believe that the help is there. What they see is that it costs this much and there's just no way. So they don't even look for these resources to even know that they're available. So thank you for sharing that. And then sharing about the Mary Byron Project, knowing that that's available to people in this area. And then hopefully even beyond if you want to explore it. And now, is the training that you did, is that connected to the Mary Byron Project, or is that a totally separate thing?
It's not actually, it's a separate thing. Emily, I call her Emily, Dr. Bonestall Postel. She's my friend, so I just call her Emily. But she worked to get Marsy's Law passed in Kentucky. So if you don't know, Marsy's Law, there are about 7 to 9 states maybe that don't have a sort of version of Marsy's Law, but most states do now, and Kentucky does as of a couple of years ago. And it is a constitutional provision that provides state constitutional rights to victims of crime. So where criminal defendants certainly have lots of constitutional rights under the federal and state constitutions, it has not been until in recent years that many states have adopted constitutional rights for crime victims. So it's the right to be heard, it's the right to be present by counsel if you want to have your safety taken into consideration, those types of rights. And so Emily and I met when she was working on that, and she's a victimologist. And we just really both have a heart for, and we've met and interacted with lots of crime victims in our lives, and we've seen how the system has treated them and heard the experiences that they've had. And we just thought, most people working in the system are really well-intentioned, but they don't understand trauma and they don't know what they're doing. And so even some part of the training is to explain what trauma looks like and how memories are formed during trauma, and to say things like, look, to a bunch of lawyers, and lawyers, we some of us have egos, and some of us are, we're all very concerned about our professional integrity and ethics and those sorts of things. And if somebody comes in and they're angry and they're upset and they're yelling at us and they're telling us we're doing a terrible job, we might be ready to flee out of that situation. And part of our explanation is that you have to think about what's going on around them. I had a client once, and she said, anytime somebody had to take off a belt, it was a triggering moment for her because she was sexually assaulted, and it all came rushing back vividly. In our courthouse, when you walk in through the metal detectors, sometimes people are taking their belts off. So if she were to walk to the courtroom after that and interact with me or some other lawyer or some other person, she may be reacting in a way that is uncharacteristic of her, that is, filled with anger or fear or distrust. And I should be careful to immediately assume that that's who she is at every moment, that I can assume that because she's acting that way, nothing she said is true or anything like that. And I have to know that there might be other circumstances going on, and just give her a moment, treat her with dignity throughout that process, allow her to be heard and help her to feel safe. And then we can move on from those moments.
Yeah, that's powerful. A lot of people are not aware, and we're not going around telling everybody what we're triggered by, because oftentimes even those that are triggered don't even know what caused it.
Exactly.
They may not even had the therapy or the resources to even connect the two together. They're just reacting because that is their safety.
And you may not even know you're reacting.
Right.
And there's so many things in the court system. It's such fortunately, most of us aren't there every day. And so even if you're just there for a run-of-the-mill traffic ticket, there's a lot of anxiety that is produced by that process. So if you add to that I've experienced trauma, and you add to that the trauma is the reason that I'm here, and you add to that, and the person who inflicted the trauma is going to be sitting in the courtroom looking at me, there's a whole lot to deal with and a whole lot going on. And if people in that process can understand just this much of what you're going through, your chances of coming out of that less traumatized are better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I love that you get that. And I love that you're helping people connect to that and speaking to that. And it's probably an uncomfortable place to be as a professional lawyer, talking to your colleagues and kind of like calling their baby ugly in a way, like, I don't, for lack of a better term, but like, you've been kind of doing it wrong, and we're going to teach you how to do it right. And hopefully they're going to come in from a different perspective, an open perspective, because the outcomes hopefully are the same as what you want, but like, we have to navigate it differently. I appreciate everybody that's giving all these wonderful comments. A lot of survivors here, a lot of victims that have gone through this court system, and they've experienced the things you're talking about, right? We're not alone, and it happens across the states, it happens across the world, and what we really want is to feel heard and have empathy, and like you said, in those moments that aren't who we truly are, to be honored in that and give us some time and space to navigate that. So I love what you're doing, and you're teaching, and you're bringing this awareness. So I know that you are, and this isn't why we're doing this, but I think it's really important for you to share like what your journey is being, an attorney in the area, and then going to be a circuit court judge. Like, what can you bring to this experience in this topic range?
So, as a brief explanation, the circuit court here in Kentucky is a court where felonies are heard after indictment. So anything someone can go to prison for more than a year, capital murder cases, and civil cases where the value at issue is $5,000 or more, and then a few other types of sporadic cases. But those are the primary cases that are heard. And I think that what I know from my 20-year career is that most people walk into the court system traumatized, whether it's because of the thing that brings them there, or whether it's because of other trauma that they've experienced in their life. And because of the way the system's set up, it can re-trigger that trauma for any of those people, whether that's what they're there for or not. I think it's important that we have judges on the bench who understand these things, and important, not just about trauma generally, but certainly domestic violence cases are often felonies, and it's important to have judges who understand the cycle of domestic violence, because here's why I think that's so important. One of the reasons it is so hard to escape a domestic violence relationship, and there are many of them, so I don't mean to suggest that this one's most important or that this is the only one, but one of the reasons that I hear people say is because, I couldn't call the police or I couldn't go to court because I don't trust that system. And as long as we have people there who don't understand what domestic violence is, how it impacts families, how it affects individuals, then it's not going to be a system that we can trust to handle those cases. And like I said, the law is not always going to be on your side. Whether you're a victim, whether you're a civil litigant, no matter who you are, the law is not always going to be on your side. But if you have a judge who has some empathy and training and understanding about what you've experienced, maybe we can build that trust in the system again, and we can get to a place where our system is helping make more people safer than it is right now.
That is what we need to shift. So thank you for what you're doing with the programs that you do, and I definitely wish you well on making that happen for our community, especially because that's where you're at. So before, I just want to do a quick recap of, because you've dropped a couple really great resources and nuggets for people to follow through. I want to make sure that I'm saying them right. So first one is the Mary Byron Project. So someone can look that up and try to see how they can get involved. They might be looking for volunteers as well. So that's the thing is for me is like, I want to give back in my community what I can do. And so you may have other programs similar to that in your area if you're watching. Vine, if you are a victim of abuse or a victim of a crime and you want to make sure that you're following what's happening, you can jump on Vine and get a.
And I believe the website for that is vinelink.com.
Okay.
VINELINK.com, I believe.
Okay, and I'll try to put all these links down below when we complete this. And then the Truth About Trauma, which is from share with me. It's the spring edition of the
University of Louisville Law Review.
Okay, and I'll try to find that out and then do a link on that too. And then lastly, I think that's the majority of some of the resources that you shared. So before we wrap up, I just would like for you to share anything that maybe is on your heart that you didn't get to share yet. So before we wrap up, or if anybody has any questions, feel free to shoot them out and we'll try to answer those for you.
So the first thing I want to say is also another great resource. Most communities have domestic violence shelters. And in Louisville, our shelter is called the Center for Women and Families, and they also have a 24-hour hotline, and that phone number is 1-844-237-2331. There's also a national hotline for domestic violence, and that number is 800-799-7233. And the reason I share these numbers is because it's important for us to know what resources to point other people to. But sometimes someone sitting in a group like this is suffering in silence, and they don't know, they can't tell anybody connected to them because they don't want anybody to know, but they really just need to talk through it with somebody. And the people who answer these hotlines are trained, and they're trained in something very valuable called safety planning, which helps someone who is in a relationship involving domestic violence, who is starting to think about getting out of that. How does that happen? And this helps you plan the safe steps to do that, because we definitely want you to be safe, because it can be dangerous to leave, but it can also be dangerous to stay. So the thing I would leave with saying is, a couple years ago, I had a client, and she was in her 40s, and she was describing for me the severe domestic violence that she had experienced over the years. And she was pretty emotional already, but when she got through talking, I looked at her and I said, "You didn't deserve that. You shouldn't have been treated like that." And she really just broke down in that moment. She said, "Nobody has ever told me that." And so if you are listening and you have been in one of these relationships, or you are currently in one of these relationships, I want you to know that you do not deserve to be treated like that. No matter what is being said to you about why you deserve it or what you did to cause it, none of that is true. And if you can hold on to that spring of truth deep down in you somewhere, that will mean the world. Because it's just, you don't deserve that, and it shouldn't happen to you.
I fully agree with that. I remember the first time I actually was validated and what my experience was. It was epic, and it really gave me the energy to fight what I needed to fight. So thank you for those words. I believe everybody believes that, and that we really do need to have these resources to connect people so they feel validated and heard and seen, so they can navigate this in a different way.
I forgot to say that Election Day is November 8th here in Louisville, in Kentucky. So feel free, please get out there and vote for me, Dorislee Gilbert, for Circuit Court Judge. But that is not the real thing I want you to take from here. If you're in this circumstance and you need this help, I want this to be the encouragement that you need.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for coming on today and sharing these amazing resources. And I'll try to get the links to them and post them in my threads that everybody's watching. Thank you for everybody that came on to watch and to participate with us. We're grateful that you're here, and spread the word so people know that these resources are available, that they're not alone and they do not have to suffer in silence, that we can give the voice to the voiceless until they can be heard. So thank you, everybody that were on today, and we will see you again.
Thanks, Holly. Bye.